Today we're diving into the end of an era, the story of how the world's most powerful, most elusive drug lord was finally brought down.
I mean, think about that. This was a man running a global, multi-billion-dollar criminal empire, but he left behind almost zero footprint. He commanded a narco army with military-grade weapons, yet he himself remained completely invisible.
But you know, even a ghost can make a mistake. For Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, who you probably know as El Mencho, the end didn't come from some high-tech surveillance or a deep cover informant. Nope, it came from something much, much more human.
So, the big question is, how in the world do you find a man who has perfected the art of not being found? For years, authorities were just stumped.
Look, this wasn't just him being paranoid. It was a system, a highly disciplined protocol. He never, ever used a cell phone because he knew it would give away his location. All of his orders, they were delivered by actual human messengers who had to hike through the mountains of western Mexico. He was constantly on the move between these hidden camps, always surrounded by a small army. And for nearly 20 years, it worked perfectly.
And this is where it all came crashing down. He got comfortable, he broke his own rules, he left his deep forest hideout for a cabin in a gated community, a place already on the radar for cartel activity. Then he did the unthinkable. He invited a lover over who, and this is the key, was already being tracked by intelligence agencies. On February 21, 2026, a U.S. surveillance drone flying high overhead captured a grainy infrared image. It was just a man hugging a woman and her children goodbye. But the authorities knew. In that part of the world, with that kind of security, there was only one person it could be. It had to be El Mencho.
To really understand why his death was such a seismic event, you have to get a sense of the sheer scale of the man himself. This wasn't just some local thug. He built a global criminal corporation. His backstory is just staggering. He grew up poor, literally guarding marijuana fields. In the 80s, he crosses into California and gets into the meth business. He gets caught, does time in a U.S. prison, and then gets deported. And then, and you can't make this up, he comes back to Mexico and briefly becomes a police officer before becoming a hitman for another cartel. By 2009, he saw his chance, a power vacuum, and he took it, founding his own organization, the CJNG.
And this right here is so crucial to understanding his power. The CJNG wasn't just about drugs. No, it was a diversified, multinational operation. Sure, they trafficked tons of fentanyl and meth, but they also smuggled migrants, extorted every kind of business you could imagine, and laundered all that money through legit investments like hotels and casinos. And they backed up the whole operation with an arsenal that would make a small country jealous.
This quote from a former security official just nails their strategy. It wasn't about business deals, it was about total conquest. They rolled into towns and gave local gangs and politicians a very simple choice. Join us, or we will wipe you off the map. It was that brutal efficiency that let them expand so fast.
Okay, so let's get back to the main event. The drone footage is confirmed. Mexican Special Forces now have their man. It was time to move.
So imagine this. It's before sunrise, completely dark and quiet. And then elite troops, many trained by the US, just descend on these wooded hills outside Tapalpa. They had the roads sealed on the ground and 6 helicopters owning the sky.
The quiet just shattered. El Mencho's bodyguards opened fire immediately, and that peaceful vacation spot turned into a full-blown war zone.
In the middle of all that chaos, El Mencho did what he'd always done. He tried to vanish. He and his core team slipped out the back of the property, melting right into the forest. But this time was different. The net was closing in from every direction. The soldiers were right on their heels, chasing them through the trees, cutting off every possible escape route.
After one last, short, intense firefight, it was all over. El Mencho was down, badly wounded. They rushed him onto a helicopter, but he died during the flight out. The ghost was gone.
But here's the thing about killing a king. It doesn't always end the kingdom. In fact, in this case, it lit a firestorm of retaliation all across Mexico.
The cartel's response was insane, and it was immediate. Within hours, CJNG fighters unleashed hell, burning more than 500 vehicles to block highways in multiple states. It was a terrifying, coordinated show of force. They were sending a message.
And the price of this operation? Well, it was grim. In the end, more than 70 people were dead. Yeah, that includes 47 cartel members, but it also includes 25 Mexican soldiers. And, tragically, one pregnant civilian who was just caught in the crossfire. The cost of getting one man was incredibly high.
So, with the world's most powerful cartel leader gone, what happens next? Does all the violence just stop?
Well, decades of the war on drugs have taught us a pretty tough lesson. Taking out the leader, what's known as the kingpin strategy, almost never actually works the way you'd hope. Instead of destroying the organization, you just create a power vacuum. All those lieutenants who used to be on the same team suddenly turn on each other in a bloody fight for the throne. And that often leads to even more violence.
Which brings us to the most critical question facing Mexico and international security right now. Who is going to fill this massive power vacuum?
According to intelligence documents, these are the guys to watch. You've got these hardened lieutenants known only by their nicknames, the Gardener and the Toad. But the person seen as the most likely successor is Juan Carlos Gonzalez, a guy they call El 03. His big advantage? He wasn't just a top commander. He was El Mencho's stepson.
And so we're left with this really unsettling thought. The death of El Mencho was without a doubt a huge tactical victory for the Mexican government. But the real question is whether taking out the king has actually done anything to weaken the kingdom, or if it's simply unleashed a brand new, and maybe even more unpredictable, wave of chaos.